Board. Wonderful. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our August Air Quality Health Task Force meeting. My name is Dorothy Gilliam. I'm an air quality planner here in the Transportation Department here at the North Central Texas COG. So it's very good to see a lot of familiar names in the chat, but also quite a few new names. So welcome, and I appreciate you all taking the time to be here on a Friday morning. So since I see a couple of new names in our participant list today, just a quick overview of what our task force, our air quality task force is. So we initiated this task force back in the fall of 2019, and it's supposed to serve as a regional kind of collaborative effort in response to a couple of requests that we received from some local governments concerning the impact of air pollution and specifically transportation related air pollution on public health. And so we'd like to have these meetings 4 times a year, so once a quarter, and we like to bring together a group of government representatives, health officials, academic representatives, and air quality experts to kind of hear from each other, have some discussion, and then evaluate data that may indicate a need for additional air quality improvement strategies within the region. So very happy to have you all here today. Just a couple of housekeeping items I think I had mentioned just a couple minutes ago, but if you are not speaking, just please remain on mute. And we are recording this meeting, and we will be uploading the presentations as well as a recording of this meeting on our Air Quality Health Task Force webpage. And okay, wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off this meeting. So those of you who are standard members in this meeting and attend these meetings frequently are familiar with what I'm about to present. So we are just kind of recapping and bringing this back to everyone's attention as we do, or we try to every meeting, is kind of what the ask that we're putting out there related to health data. So this kind of spurred or became kind of brought to our attention related to our regional particulate matter episode that happened back in 2017, October 19th specifically. And these we're just kind of showing here that we were unsure of what the source of the particulate matter was, but we had an orange PM alert level, which we don't get those frequently whatsoever. We are not in non-attainment for particulate matter. So kind of different for us and for our region. And this is a graphic just showing the monitor readings for that PM 2.5 in the region. Definitely a big spike there on October 19th. So that's just kind of some background as to why we're really, we're kind of backing up our ask of some health data. So, so with this PM episode and health data, again, just kind of what we're looking for, what we're trying to find is daily or weekly health data. So kind of COPD hospital discharges, asthma outpatient visits, things like that, that we could potentially correlate for that PM episode. So if we can kind of get that data on a very granular scale, we're trying to see if that PM episode impacted health and how it impacted health within our region. So again, where and when, so we're getting county level health data trying to get county level health data for a week prior to and after October 19th of 2017, so that we can analyze this trend potentially and understand if there is some sort of correlation. And why, this is kind of the why as to why we're really looking for health data and to assess or correlate the health impacts on communities from pollutant exceedance days and maybe taking it a step further and understanding the impacts on our environmental justice areas within our region. Awesome. So this list you all have seen for a couple meetings, but we just wanted to make you all aware of a new potential data source that we kind of had conversations about over a couple weeks ago with the city of Plano was with us, and it was COG staff, the city of Plano, as well as staff from UT Dallas. And so this was news to us. So Texas Inpatient Public Use Data Files. So this is a Texas Healthcare Information Collection Center for Health Statistics. And this is a data set or data files that for the granular scale or level of data that we're looking for, there is a purchase required or purchase requirement. So we are looking into this health data set And if we can get access to it and through our organization, potentially purchase it for the data that we're looking for. And if it encompasses the data that we're looking for, we're hoping maybe we can also share that with you all. So that is just a new data source that we've stumbled upon over the past month or so, or a couple of weeks. But if there is a data set related to health, asthma, COPD, hospital discharges, things related to that nature, we are looking for that health data consistently. So if you know of any health data that you don't see on this list that you think may be applicable to us, we would love to hear about it and set up a meeting or have some time to discuss that with you further. We've had task force attendees and members reach out to us related to health data. So we appreciate you all thinking of us, and we feel like we're making an impact whenever we make that connection with you all and you reach out and related to health data. So thank you. Beautiful. And then this is just my last little slide here. So as far as getting this health data, what we plan to do with it, we are trying to analyze and evaluate the data from regional PM exceedance occurrences. So this includes that October 19th, 2017 event, and then kind of bring this to the group at least every meeting and kind of channel discussion towards local and neighborhood level hotspots potentially. And then also hear from you all your interests and potential analyses that you would want to see as far as health data and air quality and health data, how that all intertwines, and any interest in potential research or analyses that you all would like to see. So yes, that is going to conclude my slides. If anyone has any quick questions or thoughts, feel free to put it in the chat or connect with me offline. I think everyone has my contact information, but if not, I will put that in the chat. And so yes, appreciate you all being here. So, oh, Erin, I see your question. So what county did the PM event happen in? That is a good question. Oh, hello, there we go. So I don't know if Vivek, if you are on the call today. Vivek, do you happen to know or have an answer to Erin's question by any chance? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure either. I know it's the regional alert that we received. Yeah, that's something we can go back and then communicate with the group.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which monitor went through the readings, and yeah, which county that is located in.
Great question, Erin. Thank you. That's a really good question. So well, yes, Vivek and I will touch base on that and we'll get that question answered for you. Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, well, I won't take up too much time because I know we have some really great presenters here today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And well, just to recap, we will continue to bring you all health data as we acquire it or as we uncover data sources. So we will bring this back every meeting. So continue to hear updates on this from us for sure. And Cynthia, I see your question. Is this connected with the Texas Health Department? So as far as this episode and kind of our search for health data, it's not connected with the Texas Health Department, but we have been trying to acquire and understand the different data sources that the Texas Department of State Health Services that they have on their available and for purchase, if that helps to answer your question. That is something we're looking into for sure. Awesome. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to our first presenter today, Lauren Johnson. She is our Environmental Defense Fund Fellow. She has been with our team this summer, specifically with Jenny Narvaez and her team this summer. And she's going to be presenting on the Leading with Equity in the Greenhouse Gas Toolkit that she developed over the past couple months. So really happy to have you on, Lauren. Feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready and looking forward to your presentation.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Dorothy. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. Does everyone see that?
Looks great.
Excellent. Let's get started. So as Dorothy said, I'm Lauren Johnson. I'm this year's Environmental Defense Fund Climate Course Fellow. And this summer, my project for NCT COG has been developing their greenhouse gas emission reduction toolkit. So I would like to discuss with you today how we incorporate equity and particularly health equity in our analysis this summer. So just a table of contents for what I'm going to discuss, just introducing greenhouse gases since that's the topic of the toolkit, going to discuss how we incorporate equity in our analyses and our design of this project, going to go over the general background research we did to come up with the toolkit, and then energy related strategies that end up resourcing and compiling together for this toolkit, since that's what I was really responsible for. And then just list some next steps in terms of where this project will go. So just as a brief introduction, greenhouse gases is defined by the US EPA as gases that trap heat in the atmosphere. So this is primarily carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. And as you can see, the main greenhouse gas in our atmosphere is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide emissions are primarily produced through the burning of fossil fuels, such as coal, natural gas, and oil, but they can also be produced from solid waste degassing, biogenic sources, such as trees and other biologic materials, and from the production of certain materials like cement. So reducing CO2 emissions, that's just a shorthand for carbon dioxide, is the main focus of this toolkit because it makes up 80% of total emissions, and it's primarily produced through human activities that produce these emissions. So in fact, the leading intergovernmental panel on climate change, which is made up of thousands of leading climate scientists all around the world, concludes that human activities are almost all responsible for the increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere throughout the last 150 years. So since it is our doing, it should be our responsibility to do something about it. So what does this mean for Dallas-Fort Worth? So once excess CO2 emissions are added into the atmosphere, they lead to a cascade of effects within our ecosystem. So these include intensifying water cycle, which brings more intense rainfall and flooding, and simultaneously worse drought in other regions. And it particularly affects rainfall patterns by increasing rainfall in higher latitudes and decreasing it in the subtropics. And some of these effects can cause sea level rise, erosion, permafrost thawing, and warming of the ocean, which can lead to reducing oxygen concentrations and acidification, which targets our most vulnerable ecosystems. So how this occurs in the Dallas-Fort Worth region is it leads to higher temperatures, such as hotter summers. So I was hearing how hot it's been very lately, because I'm actually calling out from the Washington, D.C. area, but it's definitely been quite a swamp in the D.C. area as well. And I just do not remember it being this hot. And as you can see, the trend of temperature is not going to get any better. By the time we reach 2100, it's only going to be much, much hotter, with average temperatures near 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the summer. And this coincides with more increased rainfall and severe thunderstorms, especially in the spring, leads to higher flooding risk, more tropical storms occurring in the fall. And this in turn leads to greater infrastructure damage and of course damage on people's lives if we continue our current trends in greenhouse gas production. And since this is a health task force, I do want to point out the impact of climate change on human health. This is something important to me because I'm actually a Master of Public Health student. So I've done a lot of research on this, but this diagram from the CDC just shows how when you have the confluences of worsening air pollution, severe weather, extreme heat, impacts of water quality and allergens, then this can lead to a number of adverse health effects, such as respiratory allergens, asthma, cholera from poor water quality, heat-related illness from all this extreme heat, and cardiovascular failure. So these health consequences of climate change are very unfortunate. So definitely this was taken into consideration in the development of this toolkit so that we can put this perspective first so that we can prioritize the lives of human beings, especially ones in most vulnerable communities within our region. And one key concept related to climate change or greenhouse gas mitigation in this region relates to that climate change actually will not affect everyone equally. The effects of climate change will disproportionately impact communities which have the least means to adapt and who have been burdened with negative historic environmental impacts due to institutionalized discriminatory practices. So this is actually a direct quote from the Dallas Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan. And it just kind of shows that not everyone's going to be affected by climate change similarly. And that's particularly demonstrated by this diagram in the upper right-hand corner that just shows that countries very unlike our own is actually going to suffer the most in terms of vulnerability from physical adverse impacts from climate change. So this overall relates to the concept of equity. Equity deals with fairness, which means that people have the same access to opportunities and have what they need to thrive and succeed. And this comes from the place that not everyone has the same equal footing or the same starting ground in terms of where they are. So for example, there are certain communities that have more adverse environmental exposures, more rates of poverty, crime, chronic health issues. And because they're starting from a different place, they're going to have those effects impact them way more so than other communities. So that's why this toolkit also leads with equity so that we can consider those impacts and focus our efforts on those communities so that they do not have to keep having these burdens that continue to put them behind compared to other communities. So this is essentially leads into the foundation of the toolkit itself. So this greenhouse gas toolkit, which I've been working on this summer, is meant to inform greenhouse gas emission reduction in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. So there's three main components to that. It's a final report, which is a screenshot of it on the left-hand side, a strategy catalog that compiles all the various strategies, at least for me, for energy usage I was working on this summer, but also come up with transportation, waste, wastewater, food, so that it's very comprehensive in terms of all the sectors that need to get on board for greenhouse gas mitigation. And then also it'll have a component of equitable community engagement so that the communities that are most affected by unprecedented greenhouse gas emissions will be the ones that are informing the development of this toolkit. And this is just generated in response to local governments actually petitioning for us to do something like this. And we really need to get on top of mitigating our greenhouse gases so that we don't have to undergo those effects that I outlined earlier in this presentation. And to understand how to equitably mitigate greenhouse gases in Dallas-Fort Worth, we need to first understand its historical context that led to certain groups of people being disproportionately burdened by environmental, social, and physical factors. And this phenomenon is called overburden. So the story of how Dallas-Fort Worth produced overburdened communities is similar to most US cities in that they slowly developed through decades of structural and environmental racism. So for example, redlining, racial segregation, and serial forced displacement directed groups of people to where they lived and worked, which led to concentrations of poverty in prominently Black and Brown neighborhoods. And these communities perpetuate as environmental injustices today. So this is most prominently seen in this region in the communities of Joppy and zip code 76104. So I'll just show you zip code 76104, which constitutes the neighborhoods of Morningside, Hillside, and historic Southside. And the zip code is known because they have the lowest life expectancy in the state of Texas. So the residents are only expected to live 66.7 years, which is 12 years less than the national average. And what makes this life expectancy so unsettling is that it houses the Fort Worth's medical district, which contains 5 hospitals, hundreds of outpatient medical offices. But in those neighborhoods just mentioned, there are no doctor's offices, clinics, nor pharmacies. So what prevents them from receiving adequate health care can only be described through environmental racism, which is that there is a lack of transportation to healthcare mainly because there is a main highway cutting north-south throughout the zip code, which economically and physically segregates one side of the zip code from those medical districts. And this is reminiscent of urban renewal in many major cities that economically debilitated Black and Brown neighborhoods throughout the country. And these disparities are only worsened due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So this is definitely a consideration in our analyses because we wanted to determine what communities and areas are in need to be prioritized for greenhouse gas emission mitigation. So to do that, we need to analyze the cumulative impacts of systemic and structural racism, chronic health, and environmental toxins. So that's what's led to these GIS maps that you see here. This was conducted using the CDC's places data that has chronic health data. And they also have a social vulnerability index that creates a metric for the communities that are most vulnerable in the region. So as you can see, the communities that are most vulnerable are in this dark blue, and they're primarily concentrated into the city centers of Fort Worth and Dallas. And overall, this social vulnerability index combines socioeconomic status, household composition and disability, minority status and language, housing type and transportation, and creates an indicator to determine what are the most vulnerable communities. And from this metric, I was actually able to figure out what are the top 25 overburden communities in Dallas-Fort Worth so that they can be prioritized and targeted for mitigation so that these communities can effectively tackle the adverse effects of climate change. And this analysis is also been coupled with the presence of industrial pollution sites, just to show that these burdens are actually also contributed by adverse environmental impacts. So as you can see, the most vulnerable communities are also the ones near Superfunds and fossil fuel power plants. This also occurs for chronic physical health distress. So communities that have greater than 2 weeks of adverse physical health calamities that is chronicled in the CDC data. And as you can see, it's highly associated with the occurrence of industrial pollution sites. Same thing is true for cancer. This data is not age adjusted, so that could be a factor here, but still there's something going on that these adverse health impacts are due to the presence, or at least highly associated with the presence of these industrial pollution sites. And most specifically, if you're referring to asthma and how that relates to air quality, then I would say this is what I saw the highest association between the location of these pollution sites and the crude prevalence of adult asthma per the CDC data. And that also holds true for another respiratory illness, COPD, that is highly associated with the presence of these industrial pollution sites. So from this analysis, we're able to figure out the top 25 overburden communities based upon the social vulnerability index and combine their health outcomes due to the chronic health data we also had. And one thing that came across from an analysis that's very shocking is that the top 2 communities that have been identified as the most overburdened are also within 3 miles of a Superfund site. So this was a very shocking revelation, but that just shows the persistence of structural and environmental racism that disproportionately affects certain communities from having the best life outcomes that they could have. So what are we going to do about this? That is why, as a result of these analyses, we're going to establish or hoping to establish a partnership, such as with a local historically Black college or university or community organization, so that we can have outreach and engagement to these overburdened communities. And once that pipeline for engagement is established, we're hoping to hold public town halls that will promote open dialogue about each main topic of our Greenhouse Gas Toolkit to create an opportunity for community members to share relevant experiences and perspectives from their community. And then after this open dialogue, community members will review a section of the toolkit and complete surveys about their relevant experiences. So this overall public engagement and review process is crucial to developing a robust final project that does not contribute to disparities and equitably addresses the needs of overburdened populations. And once this pipeline to overburden communities is established, it will be translated to other existing and future health equity projects to secure its influence in policies and programming to address socioeconomic and health disparities in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. So now, with these equity analyses just mentioned as a foundation of the toolkit, I will now discuss how I took those insights to generate equitable energy-related strategies for this greenhouse gas emission reduction toolkit. So how I did that was first by researching 33 municipalities within the NCT-COG jurisdiction. As you can see, they come from very diverse sizes and land use contexts, and I was researching them for energy-related strategies that they implement in their region. And additionally, I also looked at several outside cities and regional council of governments and NGOs, and at the end of this research, which took about a month to complete, ended up with 350 energy-related strategies together. And after compiling all these strategies, they were placed into several buckets that represent the pollution sources strategy or remedy. So these pollution sources include area source, oil and gas, point source, non-road, on-road biogenic emissions. So examples of what those are on the slide. And these pollution sources are being targeted for greenhouse gas mitigation because they are main contributors to carbon dioxide emissions or carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, but also to the emissions of criteria air pollutants, which is often co-emitted with carbon dioxide emissions. And once these 350 strategies were put into these buckets, they were also categorized in terms of different remediation types they accounted for, such as energy efficiency, renewable energy, or clean transportation. And then they were combined, condensed, and synthesized into 30 strategies related to energy usage. So like I was saying, I was only responsible for the energy-related section of the toolkit, but pretty much the analyses that I mentioned at the beginning is the foundation for the entire toolkit. So since I'm only responsible for energy, here I'm going to go ahead and just show you the results of my analysis. So these are the 30 strategies that I compiled together related to energy usage. They're grouped by overarching goals, which are related to the pollution control source they mitigate. So just to clarify further, the E related to these strategies is just a code to demonstrate that this is an energy strategy, because there's going to be other sections of this greenhouse gas toolkit, such as transportation, waste, and food, that will have different codes that correspond to that section. And the numbers next to those codes correspond to which goal it is and which number strategy out of the goal it is. So now I'm going to give you a brief tour of the toolkit. And this is actually pages directly from it that I'm going to show you right now. So right here on the left-hand side is a sample page that outlines all the various indicators in the toolkit. So it starts with the code at the top, which shows the number and the type of its associated strategy, has the name of the strategy, and it also lists the various coded benefits of the strategy. So for example, there are 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that are designed to achieve a better, more sustainable future for everyone. And several entities in Texas have adopted these goals, such as DFW Airport, Dallas College, Rice University, and University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. So we decided to highlight these co-benefits because they are so widely accepted in this region. Below the co-benefits is the main important part of the toolkit, which shows the recommended actions in order to carry out the various strategy recommended here. So for example, this is building energy audits. So one necessary step is to conduct a comprehensive energy audit to identify energy savings. This middle part here just shows the general context and background about the strategy and how it specifically relates to North Central Texas and resources to make sure it's implemented. These boxes at the bottom here are all relevant criteria in order to assess the strategy relevant to other ones. So if you look at this table on the right-hand side, then this just shows the various definitions of the criteria. And as you can see, they're grouped in terms of low, medium, and high. This isn't just a random categorization, it's actually very data-driven. So this shows that, for example, if the emissions impact is low, then the emissions are less than 900 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. So this strategy overall can lead to over 10,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions reduced per year. And essentially at the end, also shows who would implement this strategy, who's the target audience, and how it's applicable to the private or public sector. And also a case study to show that it's grounded within a real example in Dallas-Fort Worth region. And since I'm running low on time, I'm not really going to talk too much about this strategy, but I pulled this strategy for this presentation because it directly addresses air pollution in the region by specifically saying that we should probably have maximum air pollution levels per zip code based upon guidance from public health experts, because there's just certain communities that are disproportionately affected by the presence of air pollution. And this strategy also advocates for greater data and accessibility so that those air pollution burdens can be identified and empowered for the specific communities that are going to be most affected by them. And this is just an executive summary. Almost done, Dorothy. Almost done. And at the top just shows the top 5 recommended strategies out of the toolkit. And then also the strategies that I recommend for the highest emissions impact, highest feasibility, lowest cost per ton, and the highest equity. And as a result of this research, also came up with some resources for state or local governments and the private sector to implement, which includes the strategy catalog that I mentioned earlier, and then also a resource bank that is full of citations and other helpful resources so that an implement entity can have everything they need to implement these strategies. So just as a conclusion, in next steps, greenhouse gas mitigation must be a priority for the Dallas-Fort Worth region, because in doing so, we can mitigate the most adverse effects of climate change and then also experience the many co-benefits. The next step is to finish this regional greenhouse gas inventory that's being conducted at NCT COG, and then set science-based targets so that we're in line with climate science in order to meet the greatest emission reductions. Want to finish this greenhouse gas toolkit with sector-specific sections, and then also have a public review process for town hall surveys and website to collaborate with the local organization and make sure the insights of urban communities are implemented in this project. So that is it for my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Lauren, thank you so much. That was extremely thorough and very insightful. I'm looking forward to any questions everybody has. It's safe to say you've been very busy this summer producing a lot of great work. So extremely happy to have you on and presenting all that you've done. Or that's just a glimpse, honestly, everyone. She's developed a whole, as you saw, a lot of really great work that we will be hopefully making publicly available soon. Lauren, so that's my first question. As far as the toolkit goes, is there a date that I may be jumping the gun, so I apologize for this question, but that we have to make this toolkit publicly available just yet?
Yeah, we still have a lot of efforts to get the toolkit ready, such as developing the sector-specific sections. And the main thing is also getting our regional greenhouse gas inventory together. So we need to complete those steps to get it ready. So most likely occur sometime next year that this toolkit will be ready for everyone.
Wonderful. So everyone just got a little sneak peek, a little teaser. Wonderful. Thank you, Lauren. Okay, so I'll open it up to any questions anyone has, any thoughts for Lauren. Yes. Kathy?
So can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So Lauren, fantastic presentation. I'm just kind of curious. I know you are an intern, I think funded by the Environmental Defense Fund. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So did they create the project? Did COG staff create the project, or did you create the project, or how did this come about? Did I miss that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't clarify that. It seems like there was a coalition, local governments through the RISE Coalition, which is a team of communities, related to sustainability, and they're the ones that asked for this greenhouse gas toolkit. So it was air quality team as part of the Department of Transportation that took the lead on that, and then EDF came along and said that, like, oh, we have this climate course fellowship and we can have an intern there to help assist in this effort. So that's kind of how everything came together.
Well, that's awesome. And my next question is, so once you are done with your education, are you planning on staying in the Washington, D.C. area?
Probably maybe initially, but I'm really just keeping my options open. I'm just very passionate about the environment and climate change specifically. I actually just moved from Miami, Florida, because I was teaching down there through Teach for America and was also doing some climate change community organizing. So I'm pretty much just open to heading to wherever the opportunities are, because this is an issue that impacts all of us.
Yes, it is. Anyway, thank you again. Great presentation.
You're welcome.
I've got a question, Lauren. This is Abhijit Basu. The question is, most of the problems around city is that one city is proactive, the others are not. And there's a lot of regional transport, and pollution doesn't really understand any borders, right? So how do you, in one of your strategies, have you looked at how you can actually amend these situations where other cities who are not following the protocol can be at least brought into conformity, so there is kind of some way we can mitigate the regional transport of pollution?
Yeah, so definitely the actions of some may impact the success of many. Definitely this toolkit is a main step to just show a regional recommendation in terms of what people need to do or what governments need to do to make sure they're in the right trajectory to mitigating greenhouse gases. But in terms of really holding them accountable, it's almost out of our reach. The most we can do is say that, for example, ozone, we're a non-attainment for. So we need to develop programs and policies to make sure that that adverse amount of ozone in our atmosphere can be mitigated by everyone around. But it is unfortunate reality that there are some communities that may not be as receptive to adopting these actions, but the best we can do on the COG side is recommend them to the gold standard and provide all the resource we can to make sure that these adverse criteria, air pollutants and greenhouse gases, can be mitigated the most effectively.
Since you and I don't belong to the government services, so I just wanted to ask you: is there any kind of regulation or any kind of process that we are following to legally mandate that from state or federal perspective, from EDF point of view?
Yeah, well, actually, the Biden administration just sent a goal of having the U.S. to reduce 50% of their emissions by 2030 and lead to net zero emissions by 2050. So it is actually being passed down from the federal side that we really need to get on top of these greenhouse gas emission reductions. So there probably will be a cascade of statewide programs and mechanisms available for that to be for that to occur. And at least on the COG side, what we're doing is developing a greenhouse gas inventory so that we know all the various sectors that are contributing to greenhouse gases. And from there, you can set a science-based target to have 50% greenhouse gas reductions by 2030, which is in line with climate science, so that we can keep within 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming that is recommended by the Paris Climate Agreement.
Right, but the new report that came out 2 weeks ago, saying that even if we kind of go at a very slow speed, obviously everything is hypothetical to some extent, we are going to breach 1.5 degrees centigrade, right? So that being said, we don't know what's going to happen in 25 to 30 years. How do we set a timeline in the short term for cities to kind of start conforming into it, given there are all kinds of political views and the spectrum is pretty large. Without a strategy, it's basically asking people to do the right thing. It never happens, right? Even in my community, people won't go out and actually stop a burning, land waste burning that is happening. So politics is all about what makes money, right? At the end of the day, or how it drives the economy. So how do we kind of try to kind of translate that into strategy? Because I look at these documents, but I don't see any concrete way to get there in, say, 5, 10, 30 years. And then obviously we know that as the administration changes, things can go very far from where the center is.
Right. It is really unfortunate reality of just the current state of climate science and how it's been highly politicized. It seems like the most we can do is just hold the gold standard so that other peoples can models. And fortunately, there are several companies that are also making science-based targets to say that in line with climate science, we really need to have 50% greenhouse gas emission reductions by 2030. And that is considered the short term. 2030 is only 9 years away. So the most we can do is be data driven so that we can have these strategies that will reach that goal. So that's why we're making this inventory so that we can set those science-based targets. And as part of this project, we also have, I think it's like 9 or 11 other local governments in the NCT COG jurisdiction that's also creating these greenhouse gas inventories and hopefully also set these greenhouse gas targets so that we can be in line with climate science. So it's an unfortunate reality that there's only so much within our control because we can only sacrifice the liberty of the individual to ensure the liberty and freedom of the collective. So that's just a large moral conundrum, but the most we can do is just set the standard and hope that everyone will catch up with what climate science declares.
So our strategy is hope.
Essentially at the end of the day, but our hands are tied. Dorothy, have something to say?
Yes. Yeah, no, I was just going to say thank you, Lauren. Great. Those are great points and good response there. And I did want to, I know we're kind of moving through some time, so I did want to hand it over. I see Cynthia had a quick question, so feel free. I think you're unmuted, so feel free to go ahead and ask away.
Okay. Hi, Lauren. I live in the same community where Abhijit lives, the previous speaker. And we've had a couple of things pop up in our community, one being that his neighborhood is right next to land where they had the option of being able to remove all of the shrubs, et cetera, by doing it with, I guess, a plow or whatever mechanization they have, but instead they wanted to burn it. And we contacted the air quality department, and they initially told him that there were things that they could do to help force them to not burn. But at the end of the day, the HOA president approved them burning, and Abhijit was just a solo, literally, who could not get the attention of the neighborhood. And this is a high-end neighborhood. Average price of homes is about $800,000, and they're just too busy. And so in looking at the presentation that you made, there was a highlight of what's happening in the areas where we have the most poverty, and it's affecting life expectancy and all of that. It's very frustrating when we're looking at people that have every advantage and they still won't wake up, long enough to say, I want my air quality for my child or for myself. Additionally, we removed buses from our transportation program, and it's going to enforce hundreds of more cars a day going to 2 elementary schools because they closed the 3rd elementary school. And one of the objections was air quality. We brought it up. No effect. We did not get the support of our local air quality group here. We got no support. This is a worthless venture if we don't even have our regional and local support whenever we have a situation that comes up. So you're talking about things that are literally, my heart goes out to anyone who's got poor air quality. But when that becomes a highlight of the conversation, when we can't get people, who have every advantage to even care about their own air quality, it's really frustrating. And we're not getting the support of the actual board. So 32 people showing up at these meetings is not going to enlighten millions of people. And so I'm not sure how the exercise of having community outreach and having, hearings and things like that. I was on the council here. People don't show up. And I just think we're going to need to broaden our scope of how we communicate to get the point across. Because I think you're going to find it's going to be very frustrating for you if you go through this whole, kit that you're doing. And part of it's involving the public, and the public's asleep. And we see the public asleep in so many ways. But this is an area where we're taking a lot for granted because nobody's dying, right? Or at least nobody that anybody sees. So I would suggest that you look at how you're going to impact feedback and broaden your scope a little bit of where you would go with that. That's just my personal input on your presentation. So, but
yeah, absolutely.
Very good presentation, super good presentation.
Oh, thank you. And this was definitely a consideration when I did hear a lot of feedback in terms of similar projects. There just wasn't a lot of community engagement or reach, even with the current modes in terms of how they did the outreach. So that's why we really wanted to change it up and try to partner with a local historically backed college or community organization that does have that reach and does have that impact, so that we can use that pipeline to conduct community engagement. And we wanted to at least have a robust online platform such as surveys, and can hold town halls virtually. But you're right, it is a large challenge to get individuals engaged, particularly online. I saw that myself when I was a teacher. I had 150 students, and when we turned into virtual school, only about 30 showed up. So this is a challenge, just reaching many sectors, and the most we can do is just try to be innovative and form partnerships with others that seem to have more success with our current modalities.
May I ask a question? And thank you, Lauren. This is amazingly outstanding work that has to be done. This whole hill is steep enough to climb as it is, but without your science-based research, we won't even start taking steps. But like you said, the community engagement is a perennial problem. And I think you said something in what you just finished that I really spoke to me, and that is you got to do some innovative ways. And it might even be connecting with some even national community engagement nonprofits who can then go into the neighborhoods. But my real question is this: can your work come with some specific action recommendations for local governments or localities to kind of, you got the science, but sometimes people have to be told what to do or given ideas of what to do. For example, I was talking to someone the other day, we were talking about maybe connecting some of this work and some of this science to building code requirements, like anything that's going up in or near or around like some of these impacted communities, or any community in a whole city or whole region. Subject it to its impact on some of your findings and some of the issues that you talked about. And again, that's a start. But where I'm going again is the next step I see too is perhaps a baby step, but in terms of implementation, because that's what everybody's concerned about. And that's giving some recommendations or giving some ideas to legislative bodies or those who are able to enforce and put down rules, giving some ideas to them as to how some of these things can be implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of left out in this presentation. I mentioned that one part of this project is the strategy catalog. And this strategy catalog is actually going to be digitized and be an online platform for these climate action recommendations. So what they can do is say what governing body they represent. So let's say there is a local government, they can check off local government. They can say, oh, we want to do something about buildings. So there will be a drop down for buildings. So you select that. And then they can be like, what kind of buildings do you want to do? Oh, residential, commercial, industrial, and so on. and then they can select that drop down. And then from there, they will pop out some strategies that they can do to implement in their respective implementing entities, so that we don't have to go through all this legwork of going through this toolkit and say like, oh, this is for me this year, what do I do? But no, this will be something that's very interactive and can be provided for them through that platform.
Indeed, it gives local governments a lot they can add to their environmental reviews, or maybe they need to have a whole new review, climate change impact review. Who knows? But your work is excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you everyone for those questions. I'm gonna go ahead and kind of step in and move forward with our next presenter. But Lauren, I just want to say thank you so much. Your presentation was fabulous, and I look forward to the toolkit once it's complete here next year sometime. So thank you. And thank you everyone for your questions. And if there are questions, we can kind of circle back to some of them at the end. So thank you everyone. All right. So moving on, we have next up on our agenda is David Whitley from the Texas Trees Foundation and Jeremy Johnson with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. They will be presenting over the Southwest Medical District Air Quality Monitoring Project. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen quickly. And I think we're ready to roll.
Okay.
So yes, go ahead. Thanks.
Thanks, Dorothy. As Dorothy mentioned, my name is Jeremy Johnson. I work with Texas A&M Transportation Institute. This project is a partnership between a couple different groups, myself, David, and there's some others here on this call, I believe, from Texas Trees Foundation. And then we also have other partners in the Nature Conservancy in the city of Dallas. Back in, I believe it was the February meeting, the city of Dallas presented on a very similar project we're doing called Breathe Easy Dallas, but that was very early in that project. We didn't have a lot of data yet, and so this is kind of a follow-up. It's kind of a co-project almost, if you will, as far as what we're doing with that project. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to David. He's going to give a quick overview of what the Southwest Medical District project is as a whole. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the air quality monitoring that we're doing in that area. David?
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. And just, yes, I'm also joined by Emily Fitzgerald and Lanny McClellan. They're on the call as well today from the Texas Trees Foundation. And so we're really excited to be here to share this project with you. It's something we've been working on for quite some time. I guess if we can advance the next slide. A background on or maybe even the next one, the Southwestern Medical District. For those that may or may not be familiar with it, it's just north and west of downtown Dallas, and it's a major regional destination in and of itself. Huge employment center. There's major medical institutions, Parkland, Children's, and UT Southwestern that are there, along with a whole array of additional medical institutions and support services. And it's approaching 40,000 employees that go to work there every day, 3 million people that visit every day or every year for various clinical visits and ER visits. And from an environmental perspective, and you can see on this screen, it's effectively a heat island within a heat island. Some prior research that the Trees Foundation did revealed two things about Dallas, and in particular the medical district, is urban heat. We're not performing very well. We're heating up right there behind Louisville and Phoenix. And with regard to tree canopy, we're not performing very well either. Overall, the city of Dallas is at about 28% tree canopy. The Forest Service recommends 40%. If you look at the area we're working within the medical district itself, it's at about 7% within kind of the shared space and rights of way that we're looking to transform. And so there's certainly opportunity to improve that, and as a result, improve environmental health and public health as well. And so the next slide shows the first phase of work that we're working on, and we're tackling the Harry Hines corridor from Mockingbird to Market Center, essentially, and looking at that 2-mile stretch of road and designing interventions that will, not only promote active transportation, get people out of their cars for the internal trips within the medical district, which is shown to be, there's quite a bit of pent up demand from a survey that we've conducted within the district. But also look at there's a major interchange at Inwood and Harry Hines that's smack in the middle of the district. It's a physical divider between the 4 quadrants of the district. You cannot get across it on foot or bike in any safe way. Similarly, it's a huge nexus of cars that pass through there, and so being able to mitigate the negative impacts of that transportation infrastructure is something that we're looking to do as well. And so we asked the community what they wanted to see in this project, and the next slide outlines really, they're looking for something very different than what's out there today. There's a strong desire amongst the institutions as well as the folks that we've talked to and heard from to really cultivate a more campus-oriented atmosphere, to facilitate those bike and pedestrian connections, to use public space as a place for healing, and create a healthier environment that is much more linked to nature. And so if you look at the existing conditions on the next slide, and just kind of an example of that, interchange I mentioned, it's effectively all car all the time. And so we, from the get-go, started thinking about this project as something well beyond just your standard issue streetscape enhancement project, but how can we strategically use our rights of way and the shared space within them to improve environmental conditions and as a result improve public health conditions and outcomes by limiting exposure to pollutants, by increasing exposure to nature, which has all sorts of physical and mental health benefits. And if we're able to do this correctly, do it in a way that not only creates the type of campus identity that the community is looking for, but is effectively creating a cleaner, healthier place in the process. And so a couple of slides just to show the design work that's underway and how we're looking to transform this. We're thinking about it not just from the perspective of just simply adding trees and green to solve all the ills of the built urban environment, but doing so in a very strategic way and a very evidence-based way. And so looking at data that we're starting to collect, which Jeremy's going to walk you all through for us to understand the existing conditions with respect to air quality. We're also looking at ways where we could deploy a finer grid of sensors as well at the pedestrian level so that we could start to understand how the conditions change at a micro level, and that thereby then helping to inform us how best to arrange plantings, what type of plant material we need to include in order to increase the canopy, which is needed to address heat, but to make sure that we're not doing so in a way that's actually trapping pollutants, that we're thinking about airflow and how we can begin to filter out those particulates for particularly in areas where you might see gathering for dart stops or other outdoor spaces in order to create this type of healthier environment. And so that's kind of where we're working, and we're excited to be partnered with A&M and CAR-T and the others to start to think about and really understand how we can leverage this project to help address some of the environmental ills that are facing the district. And so with that, Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you for your slides.
Sure, thanks, David. And so what I'm going to focus on here is just one aspect. David mentioned some other sensors and other data that can be collected as part of this project. But what we started back in March of this year was collecting ambient air quality data at 3 sites, excuse me, within this corridor. So what we're using here, and again, there was a presentation in February on some other locations where we have these same monitors in Dallas. But we're using what's considered a low-cost sensor. These are not your regulatory sensors that TCQ and others use for that sort of data collection. But these are lower-cost sensors that allow us to put more up and cover a more dense area, if you will, with these monitors. And the first thing we did, this picture actually in the middle, and this was covered a little bit more in the previous presentation, and there's actually a report out on it now. These are, I think in this picture, there's approximately 14 or so of these low-cost sensors stationed at a regulatory site within Dallas that is operated by the City of Dallas and TCQ. So we did a very thorough investigation of these sensors. How well do they work? How well do they match, if you will, the regulatory data. And so those findings, again, we can discuss them here if anybody has any questions, but that's covered a little bit more on that other report, so I don't want to go over it too much here. Essentially what we're measuring is ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and PM. At the locations in the Southwest Medical District, we also have the capabilities to measure VOCs, but we have not installed those monitors at these locations. Dorothy, I think you can go to the next one. So with that, what we've developed is a real-time monitoring system that allows for this data that we are collecting at these sites to be shared real-time. I say real-time, it's approximately 20-minute delay, but real-time with the public, and allows them to see kind of a live what's happening right now, as well as they can go back and view the historical data. Like I said, we installed these in, I believe it was around the last week in March is when the data starts for these specific sites. And so this is just kind of an overview of what the system looks like. This map shows you the 3 locations where we have monitors currently for this project. There's 2 actually on Harry Hines. One's at Record Crossing and one's at Medical District Drive. And then the other one is just south of that intersection David was discussing at Harry Hines and Inwood. It is actually on Inwood, just a little bit south of that intersection. And so, Lord, you can go to the next slide. So this is just some more details of kind of what's in this data set. That's, like I said, it's being updated in real time. We do have a link currently where you can go view it. That's not the permanent link. And Dorothy, once we get the permanent link, we'll obviously share that with you. So this presentation or the link on the website, y'all's website, can be updated. But essentially, you can go there, you can look around, you can look at the data. It gives you an overview of what's going on in real time, and then you can drill down to the historical data at each site. From the time we install it until, like I said, about a 20-minute delay on the data. So if there's not any questions, Dorothy, you're welcome to open that link and kind of show what the live site looks like. But other than that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you, David. I appreciate that. It was very informative. I think I'm very excited to see that vision come to life in the future. And so, yes, this is what I have shared on the screen is this real-time portal or Power BI tool that Jeremy was just talking about. So a lot of, again, live data, as he mentioned, historic data, kind of looking at trends, and then location info, and then the air quality index information as well, toggling through the different pollutants. So PM 2.5, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, PM 10. So I think this is fabulous. So yes, I will open it up for any questions. I might just play around with this in the background. If anyone wants me to show anything, I'm more than happy to do that as well. But I do see, Aaron, that you have a question in the chat. What is the temporary link? I can or if Jeremy, you have that handy, you could.
Yeah, I'll get it and paste it in the text. Actually, you can see it on top of the screen there. It's that very long jumbled mess of characters. That's why we're working on it. It's going to be hosted eventually, hopefully within a couple days, on a TTI website or a CAR-T website. We're still kind of deciding the best place to put it. But once that is out there, I'll be sure that Dorothy has the most recent, or the good link, if we're going to call it that, so that she can post it to the AQ site, and that'll be where it's permanently hosted.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeremy. Awesome. I see you put that in the chat. Thank you. Okay. And I think I see a hand up. JT, did you happen to have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. I just had a couple quick questions. So the first one, is there a live correction factor that's applied to this, or is this just the raw data right now? So
this is what we're calling calibrated data. Gotcha. And so what we did was in that one picture you saw where the monitors were at a TCEQ site. When we get a monitor in, the first thing we do is we take it to that TCEQ site and leave it for approximately a month, depending on how much time we have available. And we actually calibrate it to the regulatory site data. So once it's been calibrated to the regulatory site, we then can put it in the field. And so after that, there's no additional correction factors. It's just those calibration factors that are used.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then second one, is this sort of your self-created hosting platform here? I know it's the Power BI, or is it with the as a part of like the sensor equipment?
No, so it's kind of we created it at TTI as part of the two projects that are going on. So essentially, when we mount a sensor from this specific company, it transmits all the data via cell tower to their internal cloud system that you have to have a login to go and get. So that data, unfortunately, is not easy to share with the public or with other users. So what we've done is we created a back-end application that actually goes to that site every 20 minutes and downloads the data and stores it to a database that we can then access using this Power BI platform. So, essentially we're copying the data over from their, password protected logged in site to a site that we have more control over, that we can then build this database for the Power BI to pull from.
That is incredibly helpful. Great presentation. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right.
Hi, Jeremy.
Yes, I'm sorry.
This is Abhijit. I've got a quick question. I'm looking at your temporary site, and I look at kind of 12 in the morning today. The PM 2.5 was at 100. PM 10 was at 60. Is that kind of very accurate reading at this point in time, or is still kind of under observation?
So, excuse me. So which? Okay, yeah. I see Dorothy has it. So yeah. So that's probably going to be. I mean, that's what the monitors are reading at that time. Now, one thing to keep in mind: this is showing the AQI values, not the raw concentrations.
Right.
And so there is a little bit difference there. But essentially, yes, that is what it was recording at that time. You can see on this page here, we did have some power issues with two of the sites. So some of the data is being cut off because it doesn't have, enough data to calculate the AQI. But yeah, that's what it was reporting at that time.
And what's the accuracy of this compared to any regulatory grade? Because none of the regulatory grade is picking at 100 anywhere around Texas, or sorry, DFW at this point in time. So I'm just kind of wondering, is it very local source there, or what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be, and the one thing that is a little bit different about this specific one that's reading very high. The monitor is literally right over Harry Hines Road. And so we've looked into this a little bit because this site does tend to have a lot higher PM ratings than some of the others. And so one thing we're looking into, again, we haven't really dove really deep into the analysis yet to try and see what's going on, but it is so close to that road that, you know, we think it might be picking up some traffic related, you know, very local data that the regulatory sites aren't going to pick up.
Okay. The other question that I had is in your PM10, it's at 60 and PM 2.5 AQI is at 100. Are you guys not considering PM 2.5 into PM10 while doing the AQI?
Let me see what. So I can go back and check it to make sure it's possible that because this is still technically a beta device. I can make sure it may just be labeled. They may have switched the labels in there, but essentially, you know, it's just we're just taking what these devices read and doing the calculations. Okay. You know, one thing I can say, and I'll try and get Dorothy. I'll try and get you the link to that other report as well that you can share with this. You know, one thing to really keep in mind with these low cost sensors is you kind of have to know what they're made to do, and they're not made to exactly match what the regulatory monitors are, right? Just because of the cost and the maintenance and all that. So you do have to take into account there is a little bit of an accuracy trade-off with using these low-cost sensors versus a true regulatory monitor. So yeah, when it's rating 100, that may not, you know, you shouldn't say that to 100% certainty that it was 100 at that time, right? There is some give and take, and you kind of have to look at what you use these for and how you use the data and be real careful in how you use it.
Right. And that's the point I kind of wanted to get to, because most of the regulatory grade sensors around DFW, kind of, if they get to 25 PM, that's kind of big number already. So it's showing 100, which is like 4 times of that. So it's kind of very concerning.
Yeah. And so these, like I said, these have been, in fact, for the previous project, you know, when we calibrate these now, we leave them at the regulatory site for about a month. But during the project where we were looking and analyzing the accuracy, these devices, even some that are being used in this project, were at the regulatory site for over a year. And so we got a lot of good data with them, you know, right next to the regulatory monitors. And, you know, one of the things we found is they trend very, very well with the regulatory monitors. But again, the absolute number may be off by a little bit just because of the nature of the technology.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that it is a possibility that we are reaching at 100 micrograms per cubic meter in that region at some point in time.
Correct. But keep in mind, these values here that you're seeing are AQI, not microgram per cubic.
Yes.
Yeah, but correct. Yeah.
And Jeremy, I had a quick question. I don't know if you're at liberty to say, but I know these are low-cost monitors. Do you happen to know the type of low-cost monitor that they are?
Yeah. So these are they're called AQ. It gets a little confusing with all the acronyms. These are called AQYs, and they are manufactured by a company, Airqual, that's out of New Zealand.
Perfect. Have any other questions for Jeremy or David? Oh, Lori, yes.
I have a couple questions. So Jeremy, I'm playing around on the website. So ignorance is bliss, and knowledge is scary, right? I'm noticing that like the Harry Heinzen Medical District's location for both PM10 and PM2.5 is, it appears, if I'm reading this graph correctly, that, that particular sensor spends a lot more time in the higher AQI range than either of the locations. And I'm curious if y'all have any initial thoughts as to why that particular location, when it's Harry Heinzen Medical District, just a couple blocks down the road from Harry Heinzen Record Crossing, which doesn't show the same trend.
So the one thing is, and Dorothy, I don't remember the pictures I used, but if you can go to the location info tab. So one of the things about that, that particular installation, that's it. So you can see on that one, if that, and it's hard to see from the picture, but the little white box, that right there, that's the monitor. That's the monitor that's doing the measurements. And you can see it's right there, right above that intersection. And I've been out there doing these installs. There's a lot of truck traffic and stuff like that. So I do think that has something to do with it. Versus if you go to the record crossing site, the location of the sensor is slightly different. Uh-oh, it's not loading this picture. It's not right over the intersection, and it's over in a little corner that's blocked by a bunch of buildings, essentially, right? And it's the sensor is not downwind from the road as well on record crossing, and so it's just one of those things where I think it has a lot to do with where the sensor is installed and what kind of traffic is going right by it. Again, we haven't fully, fully done the analysis yet to determine if that's the case, but that's kind of our initial thoughts. Great.
I do have one other question. You talked about using, increasing tree canopy as part of what y'all are looking at here, but doing that in a way that does not trap pollutants. And in Lauren's control strategy catalog, tree planting is, spoiler alert, tree planting is part of what she has identified in terms of specific strategies. And so since that's something that, any local government that's on the call today could do a tree planting project, are there general guidelines that cities could follow to know that they're adding vegetation in a way that does not trap pollutants? Or is that something that requires like in-depth site analysis at every location? Just curious, how easy is it for cities to be able to take on a strategy like that and avoid those unintended consequences, if that makes sense?
And that's actually something we're looking to learn as we go through this project. And so we're working with a group out of Oakland called Hi-Fi Design Laboratory. They did work in Louisville on the Green Heart project there. But they can model airflow and intake data, that we collect for, temperature and air quality, and they can start to model how different planting interventions affect where and how the pollution collects. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to sort of begin that modeling soon, so that we can start to develop, at least kind of a broad set of parameters and guidelines that can maybe help inform others about what are the types of considerations you need to think about for different types of plantings and how that space is going to be used, and where you are. Like for instance, if we're thinking about an area around a heavily used DART stop, where there might be a lot of pedestrian traffic and a lot of folks spending time waiting, we might want to be more considerate of making sure there's airflow, A, to keep us comfortable that it'll be cooler in the summer with airflow, but B, that's also keeping the pollution moving versus arranging plants in a way that might actually concentrate it there. And so that type of modeling is what we're looking to discover. What are the parameters that we can share with others around those decisions?
Perfect. When y'all have that figured out, are you willing to come back?
We would love to share. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Fabulous presentation. Thank you both so much. And Jeremy, I look forward to that report, and no worries, no rush on the updated link whenever you have a chance. But this is fabulous. We'd love to be able to link to it on our webpage. So
sure, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. So next up on our agenda, we have Rock Robinson. He's the co-founder and CEO of Ikara. And for those who don't know, Ikara is a Tesla rideshare company operating in the DFW Metroplex. So he will be presenting on some of the work that they're doing related to hyperlocal air quality data and the collection that they've been doing and some of the potential future work that they are planning to utilize with that data. So Rock, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your slides. However, if it's easier for you to share, just let me know. But I will go ahead and pop these up on my screen real quick.
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you good.
I could share my screen because I'll.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. And I'll just have them as backup, but definitely feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Cool. All right. All right. Can everybody see this?
So I see your screen. Oh, there we go. There we go. See it good.
Got it. Got it. Cool. All right. Before we get kicked off, I just want to say thanks for everybody that's on the call. This is some amazing stuff. We're excited to be a part of this and work with you guys and the team and all the different entities that are involved in helping solve some of these big problems. So I can't go without talking about our team. Mike Carpenter's on this call, who's our CTO, who's a phenomenal individual and a genius. Addition Candy, who's leading our sensing R&D and strategy for some of our air quality initiatives. And these guys are amazing. And I'll talk about some of the partners as well. Our mission is to reduce emissions and support the utilization of sustainable vehicles. We know that there's a lot of EVs out that are underutilized. And so we came into this idea in 2018 to solve a few problems. One of those problems was the lack of sustainable transportation as it pertains to moving people around on rideshare platforms. We also know that those cars that are currently on rideshare programs are in fact using and producing way more emissions than they would if they were not being used in those services. Health is an issue, we all know that. And then there was an issue with experiences, inconsistent experiences. And we've just kind of discovered that micro fleets have this really unique ability to focus on customer service as they did, back in, the day when, cab companies would, kind of focus on taking care of equipment and people and experiences. So we've kind of combined those things to create a car. What we do really well is really kind of partner with our reforesting organizations to help plant trees every time somebody gets in our car. So we plant a tree for every rider, and we make a donation to those entities and organizations. Health and safety, because we're building on micro fleets, meaning they're managed teams, managed groups, we're able to keep vehicles extremely clean, partner with companies like PermaSafe to have microbial killing type methods and services in the car. We're able to use safer cars. We're able to keep those cars in greater condition. We're able to manage the drivers and et cetera. Emissions goals. We started this out to help help entities and businesses and airports reach their emissions goals by showing measurables, which I'll talk about in just a second. Public awareness is a big piece. I think someone talked about that earlier. What we found that when we engage with customers, we have an opportunity to bring awareness and education to them. Subsequently, because of that, we've actually helped hundreds of people in the area here at DFW convert from ICE cars to EVs, simply because we found that 97% of the people that actually ride with us have never been in an electric car before. But once they ride with us, 95% of those people say that they would actually buy an electric car, all things considering, on their next purchase. So that's a part of this whole thing, is like, how do we make people more aware? And then we take those vehicles, and then instead of them, using them to go to work and park, we say, hey, how about we utilize those cars during the times that they were not being used? And so we fundamentally created ways to do that, and automations to do that, and basically put car sharing, ride sharing together to create some effectiveness in the sense of moving people around in sustainable vehicles. High speed public charging, we are one of the anchors to that. We have partners now, like Park My Fleet, who wants to come into the DFW area to build sustainable electric driven hubs that could charge vehicles from 500 to 1,500 cars overnight. So we want to be an anchor to that and build off of that. And also we partner with commercial developers and corporations, and I can kind of talk about that offline, to help reduce parking and city congestion. We're actually working with one big developer here in the DFW area to reduce parking garage space, and then implement some type of ride sharing or ride scenario on the floor. So that just easy access for a resident to come from their home down to a ground level to get straight in the car and go where they need to go and back, instead of having to pay so much for parking infrastructure, et cetera. So today, I want to kind of talk about Ikara Labs. This is something that we're really proud of. When we started Ikara, ideally, we knew that if we could kind of show some of the emissions data that we were capturing, that maybe it would encourage more usage. So that's kind of why we started collecting lots of data. And our goal here is to offset pollution, increase reforestation, and produce market intelligence on problematic environmental issues throughout the community. So a lot of the things that I'm about to show you today are things that we started in 2018. Some of this stuff we just started, and we're really excited about it. So this is a little snapshot of some of the daily emissions breakdowns that we actually capture. So every time one of our vehicles moves to do anything, whether it's delivering pizza packages or people, we capture that data, and then we actually serve that data up to our servers, and then we put it into our app so that actual riders can use it. Not only could they, see it, not only could they see that, they can actually gauge their own carbon footprint and use the app to then ride more, which reduces emissions and also plants more trees. So we capture that daily. Here's a snapshot of the monthly breakdown, how we kind of capture this emissions data on a monthly basis. And you can see that red line there is kind of where the pandemic kind of intercepted where we were. What's interesting about this is that on this next slide, as you can see, this tree planting and this carbon emission correlate. The more emissions we reduce, the more trees we plant. And I thought that was really interesting how those things correlate. Today, I want to talk through, just kind of introduce Seedpod. Seedpod is a highly scalable air quality sensing platform that provides real-time, hyper-local air quality. Our vision is to combine and correlate this data with health outcomes and human cognitive behavior to unlock the vision of healthy and equitable communities and sustainable cities. Some of the stuff that Lauren was saying earlier is really exciting, and we'd love to try to see how some of this data would kind of combine, actually, with everybody who presented today. This project with Seedpod, we're really excited to partner with Professor David Larry over at UTD. Professor Larry has been doing work with air quality and sensors on moving objects for quite some time. And so we started off this journey not knowing this, and we started to build our own platform and build our own database. And when we had opportunity to meet Professor Larry and kind of talk through this, and we were able to share some of those insights to really kind of move a little bit quicker. So we're really excited about that and what he's doing there. This is a look at where all of those sensors are actually coming, that data is loading into. Right now, I'm going to show just kind of what we're looking at with PM1, PM2.5, and PM10 sensors. We track a lot of data right now. There's I'm going to show you guys a little bit of the data that we've captured over approximately 120 days. We've got about 83,000 air quality readings with about 518,000 location readings. This is longitude, latitude, satellites, et cetera, timestamps, all things that we can actually capture to make sure that the data is as accurate as possible. So this is kind of a look at our interface internally. This first shot shows part of the mapping that we created. This is one vehicle over the course of 120 days, approximately. And as you can see, that as the vehicle is driving down the road, every 7 seconds or so, it's actually taking air quality or air samples, processing that and sending it to the server in real time. So literally, as the car's moving around, doing what it's supposed to do from the rideshare perspective, there's this technology that's in the background that's really, really compelling. This is 2.5, this is PM10. And I'll show you this in a live setting in just a second, but you can kind of see the differences between PM2.5 and PM10. We are able to kind of zone in and get really granular with this. And this is what I'm super excited about. This snapshot here is right near Dallas Love Field Airport. Here in the center, you can see kind of where the runways are. You can also see all that activity is kind of where you go into the airport, go into baggage claim, and kind of turn out. We can get really, really, really close to this, and even see on like literally on a 3x3 meter kind of basis, like what's air quality look like at ground level, street level, where people are standing, walking, talking, living, etc. So this is, again, this is a snapshot over near Dallas City Hall. If you can see down to the bottom left, there's a little tag for Dallas City Hall and all of the sources that are around Dallas City Hall. So this is really, really cool information that we're carrying. And again, we're using low-cost sensors, partnering again with Professor Larry to calibrate these with the more expensive sensors as we go along. Let's see if this actually plays. This is a video of just zooming in on some of that data so you can see how granular it does get. We're able to really tap on either one of these little hexagons and then see exactly how much data has been added to that point, the geo point location, as time goes on. So every time we pass that spot in a car, we add more information in that. Historically, we want to be able to capture a really amazing mapping. This is just an example of what we're trying to do here in DFW with a 200 vehicle rollout. Over the course of 36 months, we can generate about 3 billion data points as it pertains to this mapping that I'm talking about. To save about 3 million gallons of gasoline and over 1 million pounds of carbon per month, a total of 30 million pounds of accumulated carbon over 3 years, just using 200 vehicles, which is not a lot at all. The future of Seedpod, historically, we want to create historical AQ readings from street level. We want to launch Seedpod in Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and San Francisco. We want to use these sensors mobily to detect harmful contaminants in real time and be able to warn people if necessary. Examine associations between asthma mobility and local ambient air in areas relative to high levels of pollution. We want to build out the calibration infrastructure for small fleets, which we're working on now. We want to add sensors of interest for mapping health outcomes. There's a lot of sensors that we want to add to our Seedpod that we're now kind of talking through. We want to perform air quality sensing experiments while our fleets are idling. There's times when there's vehicles that are idling near these areas that are of interest, and we can actually do experiments in those areas in those times. We do have the same hardware that could fit on a drone. Just take it off a vehicle onto a drone and send that drone to do a specific sensing type request and maybe have some type of sensing as a service someday. We want to improve rider and driver health via smart in-cabin air purification controls, where we're able to use the quality of air outside to determine what type of air quality is inside by controlling the airflow inside those vehicles and creating hardware and software for that, and provide benefits to people with disabilities and respiratory issues going forward. So I do want to show this a little bit. Let me see here if I can get this. You guys can still see this. Just a minute ago, we were talking about a spot over near Harry Hines. This is the address that he put in. So we can literally go, we've passed that area in the vehicles before. We can literally kind of see air quality on the road near the sensors that are already in place. If I zoom out of this, we're looking at 2.5 right now. This is the same information that I kind of showed you testing in 120 days. This is zooming into Dallas. And 2.5, if I turn this to 2.10, you'll see a huge spike in a lot of what's going on. There's a lot of reasons for that. And we're continually learning these things. These readings go all the way up to the McKinney area, Little Elm, Prosper. We've really captured a lot of information. Again, this is one vehicle over 120 days, and it is pretty enlightening stuff here we have. So looking forward to continuing this project and continue working with Seedpod to help inform universities, entities, schools, businesses, et cetera, cities, so that we can together fix these problems that we know we need fixing. So that is my presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rock, and to your team. Great work, and I'm very exciting to kind of see all of that data kind of play out and how you all have been mapping that and visualizing that. So I think one question, and then we can kind of get into questions for the next 10 or so minutes, but one question off the bat. So the hexagon kind of data points that are on the map, are those a function of the physical air quality concentration of pollutants, or is it also a function of the amount of times that vehicle is driving that location?
Good question. Those hexagons really represent both. Once that vehicle takes information from that location, we mark the location and continue to add values to that specific location. So over time, if you can imagine that, let's say that address that I just typed in, or I said I want to type in Dallas City Hall, I could then go to that area, and then I can then key on one of those hexagons and then look at that exact spot over time and go, wow, here's what the history of air quality looked like in that spot over the last 3 years, which is really kind of cool.
Very cool. Thank you. Good clarification. I appreciate that. That's very helpful. Awesome. Okay, so I'll kind of turn it over to any questions that anyone has for Rock or the team or Ikara. All right, and so kind of I apologize if you had already answered this, but the type of sensors that are on the vehicles, Rock, I know you said you've been working with Dr. Laurie. I don't know if you know off the top of your head the name of those sensors by any chance.
You know, we're using the same. We were using a really cheaper sensor when we started, and then we used the same sensors that Professor Larry has been testing for some time. Forgive me, I don't know the name of the sensor. I do know that it's not made in the United States. But I could definitely get that information for you.
No problem. No problem. Hi, Chris.
Mike is on the call. He may know. Mike, do you know the name of the sensor?
I do know the name. It's from a company called AlphaSense. It's the OPC N3 out of I think they're based in London, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? So my name is Chris Klaus. I work with Dorothy, and I'm curious on the routes that you've taken are, that's a good for a baseline. Is kind of getting back to all the other presentations. Maybe are there opportunities? Maybe we can coordinate, identify where some of these lower income or economic, distressed areas are. And we have environmental justice indices and shape files that we can overlay. It'd be interesting to see what the levels are in an area versus, in an EJ area versus not in an EJ area. But then also, as Dorothy indicated on our first item, we're still desperately needing health data, and eventually maybe that's a layer as well, just to see if any of these higher rates of emission collections that you're identifying can be tied to maybe pockets or areas of where there may be some high health issues in the community. So just other food for thought, and maybe we've got some of that data, not all of it, but maybe some of that data could be helpful as for further evaluation of the data.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole purpose. I mean, ideally, even some of the images that I saw from Lauren's presentation, some of those areas where there were obviously problems, we can see from the data that we've collected just in testing that they correlate. It's the higher the particle matter in those areas kind of represented some of those health issues. So we definitely feel like this is worthy of doubling down on and continuing to develop out. So again, this is all beta. We're we started this somewhere around 2020, somewhere maybe the end of mid to 20 or so, and so we've got a lot of work to do, but we definitely agree there's some areas that we can go into, and there's another kind of organic thing. Remember, we're going into Love Field Airport to move people in and out of the airport, and we'll literally be able to capture information out of the center of the city going from all different types of places, including some of these areas of interest.
Cool, thank you.
Wonderful, great question, Chris. I think kind of tying it back to that environmental justice lens is always kind of great to keep in the back of our mind in our projects and other projects in the region moving forward. So very nice. Any other questions or thoughts for Rock or his team?
Hey, Dorothy.
Yes, hi, Jenny.
Hey, I have a question. So saw that you had some data from the runway. How did you get the sensors, I guess, on the runway or near the runway?
Let me look at that. Let me show you that again. It was actually more near the runway, so I'm gonna go here.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the airport. And this is kind of around baggage claim, and this area here is actually where the runway and airport is. So we're literally driving the car around the airport into where the areas that you can drive in. This is all baggage claim area. Let me take off
Okay.
10.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's again, runway outside the airport. This is driving inside, around the airport, through the parking garages, et cetera, et cetera.
To me, that makes sense. I envision Love Field, and so I know exactly kind of the route that you take whenever you're driving through that and picking up and dropping off folks, and the amount of cars sitting there idling potentially. So that to me makes paints a picture in my mind for sure. So.
Right.
Lori, I see you're on. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Rock, I know y'all are getting this project kind of up and going. Is there anything in particular that you need in terms of partnerships, collaborations, things like that? If there's any asks you want to make of the group, if there's anybody here who's interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like we feel like this is a really unique opportunity to get super granular for many, many, many reasons. The cost to do this is extremely expensive, especially as we get to validating and calibrating the data. So we do need partners, and we do need want to join, you know, the smartest people in the world to help kind of solve this problem. So specifically right now, I think the biggest issue is getting into the calibration and validation part of what we're doing consistently. And then, you know, the next steps from that is being able to identify some of these hotspots and then send more expensive sensors and more expensive reading equipment to those areas to really understand better. So yeah, anybody who may be interested in helping with this project, we would love to partner with you and figure out how we can continue to build this out. But we're going to continue to develop as much as we can, as fast as we can. I would again keep giving Mike continual props, because he just works night and day to make sure that all this stuff makes sense for people, and I'm very grateful for that. So, but yeah, we need more people on this side of the fence to help us.
Well, thanks, Rock. And if it's not too much trouble, feel free to drop either your contact information or Mike's or whoever applicable in the chat, and hopefully we can connect you with some folks who might be able to help you. So great question, Lori. That was a good point. Awesome. And Nick, I see your hand was up. Did you have a question, or is that up yet?
So I have a bit of a question. So he specified which monitors he was using, but what I was wanting to know was, when they were evaluating the monitors for comparative purposes, well, actually, did they use comparative monitors to see how one monitor for a low-cost sensor was comparing to other ones of certain types? Because their EQY was one of the other ones that was specified earlier. And I know some of the cities have actually used EQY monitors for their low-cost sensors. I know the Purple Air is another one that's highly touted. However, there's a lot of different types of low-cost sensors with not very much data as far as what is truly regulated and what has been sifted through. And low-cost sensor data is kind of difficult to work with at times due to all of this. So I was trying to figure out, other than was it just based off of Dr. Lowry's recommendation, or was there any additional work behind that, either by him or by y'all?
Yeah, and Mike can elaborate on this if you like. One of the things that we had to kind of have a crossroads with early on is exactly what you said. We wanted to use a lower cost data because it was easier to scale. We can, although we would have to start collecting a lot of data and then validating that data over and over and over for it to actually become some type of regulatory use. What Professor Larry had done has been using this specific sensor for quite some time, and has already generated a lot of data to back it up. So for us, it was almost like, jumping on a train that's already moving, in a sense, and taking advantage of that momentum that he's already gotten. I think one of the things that we consistently talk about now is, do we, because we can scale the data really quickly, do we introduce a low-cost sensor to begin to start validating that would scale even faster? Right now, those sensors are, not too bad. I mean, the device itself that we use is, comes out to be about $700 on the vehicle. But if we could get that down, under $300-400, then we're looking at scaling that even faster, in a sense. So Mike, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, you can, but I don't know if that answered your question, but Nicholas.
It did answer it. Thank you very much for that.
This is Abhijit. I've got a question. Mike and Rob, good to have you guys present here again. From our last conversation almost 6 months ago, you guys were using Nova SDS011. Are you still using that, or are you using Professor Larry's sensor?
We're using Professor Larry's sensor, the one from that he has actually been working with. This is from AlphaSense, as Mike mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Well, great questions, everybody. Thank you, Rock. Really appreciate you taking the time to present what you all have. And of course, we'll definitely would love to have an update later on as things kind of move forward. And again, I know Rock dropped his contact information in the chat. So if anyone has any other questions or any other information that may help them moving forward in terms of that validation and calibration process, that would be a great connection. And I'm sure they appreciate that. So thank you all very much. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. We have about 7 minutes left, so we just have a couple of other updates, and then this is also time for other folks who have some updates to kind of bring those forward to, or any questions that that we weren't able to answer. But just quickly, I know Yarkis with the City of Plano had to hop off to another meeting, but he apologizes for that. But he had a quick update and just wanted to let the group know that they are installing 2 of their 5 UT Dallas monitors next month, and that their UT built monitors are medium cost units, and they are calibrated in a lab to the high cost federal reference monitors. So I think potentially in our next meeting in November, our last meeting of the year, Yarkis might provide another update, but just wanted to let everyone know that update. And then also just on our front, we've been working over the past couple of months, the past year, on compiling an air quality monitor inventory so that we could post it on our webpage, our Air Quality Health Task Force webpage, and kind of have an inventory of air quality networks, other web pages, and other supplementary information just available, kind of all encompassing on our website. So I thought quickly we could kind of touch on that. And big shout out to Nick. He has, yes, Nick Van Hossen, he's on the line. He had compiled all this information for us and got it posted on our website. So big shout out to him. I'm just gonna quickly share it just so everyone kind of knows where it is on our website. And Nick, feel free to hop in if you'd like to kind of talk through anything. But so for those who haven't visited, this link to our actual Air Quality Health Task Force webpage is in the meeting invite. But also you can access it through our NCT COG webpage as well. So on here we have, just as an FYI, we will be posting all of our meeting presentations and the meeting recording here on this webpage. And also you can filter to our past meetings and find all of those agendas, meeting notes. We were doing meeting notes for a couple of meetings last year, and presentations and the recordings from previous meetings on here as well. But specifically, this inventory of air quality networks and web pages and information can be accessed through this link. And it takes you to a separate page. And we have just a couple of lists that are aggregates of air quality monitoring networks and web pages and information. So as far as air quality networks go, we have a list here with links to each of these web pages. And then as far as agency and city air quality web pages, we have those as well as articles, additional information, and helpful links. So we'd love to hear if anyone has any thoughts or sees anything that you think we are missing. We would love to have that information, and feel free to have it quickly, and you're thinking you see and you don't see it's reflected on this list, feel free to put it in the chat. But if not, definitely feel free to email me or Nick. Nick, you can put your contact information in the chat too if you want. But yes, if there's anything on here that you think that we should add or is not reflected, we'd love to hear that information. So awesome. So kind of we've been working on this for a while, so happy to have it finally up. And is there anything? Okay, awesome, thanks, Nick. Perfect. Okay.
So the list definitely isn't exhaustive at the moment. This is just a lot of the stuff that some of us already either knows exists, as far as those of us who work in air quality daily, then some of your environment, some of your sustainability and air quality web pages. Those are all in here, as well as a few different areas at the very bottom that are linking links to sustainability profiles, as well as some reports that are in here, special projects, and additional news articles and stuff that kind of just is a shout out to different things that your organizations are doing. So the main thing about this is that this is kind of just trying to be an information clearinghouse where we can get all of the information on all of these different networks, agency websites, and all of this extra information that we can use in order to kind of help educate the public as well as each other with different things that we're doing and that we're going to do, stuff of that type of sort, where, I mean, because you hop into meetings like this all the time where you don't know that someone else was working on this and it was something that you could have either gleaned some information off of, would gladly partnered with, or you wouldn't have even known about it afterwards until you just found out about it in passing or through a search. So this is kind of something where we're trying to get all this information aggregated here to make it easier to find these types of information, help out with the building up the body of all this research, and then being able to just kind of get this all said and done so we can kind of make some good headway and progress. Also, as a note, it's kind of a really good area for bragging about the type of things that y'all have been doing, which I have zero problems with y'all doing. So my contact information is actually linked at the bottom of this page. So you're more than welcome to just literally click on that, and it will pull up my email to start an email to send to me. Y'all are welcome to give me any suggestions, additions, questions, comments, anytime. Dorothy, thank you so much for the time, and everybody as well. I hope you'll have a happy Friday.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate you. Awesome. So yes, would love to hear any feedback y'all have, and if there is anything on here that you all would like to see reflected, definitely send it our way. And I know we are truly almost at time, but if there are any other updates that the group wants to share related to air quality, health, any of that, feel free to. And if not, no worries, no pressure. I know it's Friday, almost lunchtime on a Friday. So, all right. Well, if there are no other thoughts or comments, I think we can adjourn. And just our next meeting, will be November 12th of this year. It'll be our last meeting of the year. So definitely look forward to seeing you there. I will not be there, but someone from our team will be there hosting and moderating, but we will have, I anticipate having some good presentations in that meeting. So November 12th, yes, before the holidays, before that Thanksgiving holiday. So, all right, thank you everyone. I appreciate y'all. And again, if there is anything that you all think needs to be brought to our attention as COG staff related to our project, our air quality, health, and our task force and our project and any of that, definitely feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to kind of hear any thoughts or set up a meeting with any of you all to kind of discuss anything further. But I appreciate everyone's time and have a great rest of your Friday.